The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Plaza Hotel's ballroom cast dancing shadows across the annual Morrison family reunion. I adjusted my simple black dress, feeling distinctly out of place among the designer labels and diamond jewelry that adorned my more successful relatives. At 35, I was the family's designated disappointment, or so they thought. "Anna, there you are." My cousin Victoria's voice carried across the room with practiced authority. She was impeccably dressed in a Chanel suit, her recent promotion to executive vice president at Morrison Technologies evident in her bearing. "We were just discussing everyone's achievements this year." I fought the urge to check my phone where an urgent email about tomorrow's billion-dollar merger sat unanswered. Instead, I plastered on a polite smile and braced myself for the annual ritual of subtle degradation. "Hello, Victoria. Congratulations on your promotion." I kept my voice neutral, remembering the stack of confidential documents in my home office that bore Victoria's increasingly desperate signature requests from the past month. "Thank you, darling." She air-kissed my cheek, her perfume expensive and overwhelming. "I'm surprised you heard about it, given how disconnected you are from the corporate world." She gestured to our gathered relatives. "We were just discussing how everyone's doing so well. James made partner at his law firm, Sarah's running her department at Goldman Sachs, and of course I'm handling Morrison Tech's biggest merger yet." Victoria's mother and my father's sister, Aunt Eleanor, joined us, champagne flute in hand. "And what about you, Anna? Still doing that consulting thing?" The way she said consulting made it sound like I was selling magazine subscriptions door to door. If only they knew that Phoenix Consulting Group, the firm they dismissed so easily, was actually... "Yes, Aunt Eleanor. Still consulting." I sipped my water, thinking of the meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning where Morrison Technologies' fate would be decided, though Victoria didn't know that yet. 10 years, Victoria mused, shaking her head with exaggerated concern. 10 years since you left that promising position at Anderson & Co. to find your own path. And what do you have to show for it? A small consulting practice that nobody's ever heard of. I thought about the private island I'd purchased last month, the 3 homes in different countries, and the fact that I was Victoria's boss's boss's boss. Not that she knew it. Phoenix Consulting Group operated entirely through subsidiaries and shell companies, with my name carefully hidden from public records. As the founder and CEO, I'd built it into one of the most powerful consulting firms in the world, specializing in corporate restructuring and major mergers. "We do all right," I said mildly. "How's the merger going, Victoria? I heard there were some complications." Her perfectly maintained smile flickered for just a moment. "Nothing I can't handle, though I wouldn't expect you to understand the complexities of a billion-dollar merger." James, our cousin who just made partner at his law firm, joined our little circle. "Are you still working out of that small office downtown, Anna? You know, I could help you find a real job. My firm's always looking for administrative support." I bit back a laugh, remembering the meeting last week where James's firm had desperately pitched their services to Phoenix Consulting Group, unaware that the mysterious CEO they were trying to impress was standing right in front of them. "That's so kind of you, James," I said, watching him preen at my apparent gratitude. "But I'm comfortable where I am." "Oh, honey," Aunt Eleanor interjected, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "you shouldn't settle for comfortable. Look at Victoria. She's about to close the biggest deal in Morrison Tech history. The merger with Global Tech will make her career." If they only knew that Global Tech was one of my shell companies, created specifically to force Morrison Tech into a position where they'd need Phoenix Consulting Group's help. Victoria's biggest deal was actually my carefully orchestrated plan to teach my family a much-needed lesson in humility. "Speaking of the merger," Victoria said, checking her designer watch, "early meeting tomorrow with the consulting team. They're just advisors, of course, but we have to humor them." She gave me a patronizing smile. "You should come by the office sometime, Anna. See what a real business looks like." I thought about the meeting she was referring to, the one where I would be sitting at the head of the table, not as Anna Morrison, the family disappointment, but as Anne Phoenix, the reclusive founder of Phoenix Consulting Group. "Actually," I said, finishing my water, "I have an early meeting tomorrow too. A signing ceremony for a rather important contract." "Oh," James smirked, "finally landed a big client for your little consultation business?" "Something like that," I smiled, thinking of the stunned expressions I'd see tomorrow. "You could say tomorrow will change everything." As I left the reunion, I heard Victoria's carrying whisper, "Poor Anna, still a nobody after all these years. What a waste of potential." In my car, I finally checked the email that had been buzzing in my pocket. It was from my COO. "Everything's set for tomorrow. Morrison Tech's board is desperate to close this deal. They don't realize we're the ones holding all the cards." I drove home to my penthouse apartment, the one my family didn't know about, and spent the evening reviewing the final documents for tomorrow's meeting. The merger agreement was complex, deliberately so. Buried within its hundreds of pages were clauses that would give Phoenix Consulting Group significant control over Morrison Tech's operations. Victoria thought she was orchestrating a simple merger. In reality, she was about to hand control of her company to the cousin she'd spent years mocking. In my home office, I opened my safe and pulled out a thick folder labeled Project Morrison. Inside were years of documentation, every dismissive comment, every condescending remark, matched with corresponding business decisions that had slowly but surely led Morrison Tech into my web. Tomorrow they would finally learn that success doesn't always wear designer labels or broadcast itself from chandeliered ballrooms. Sometimes it works quietly in the shadows, building something far bigger than anyone could imagine. I picked up my phone and dialed my assistant. "Sarah, make sure the conference room is ready for tomorrow's 9 a.m. meeting. And please have the photographer on standby. I want to capture every moment when the Morrison family realizes who really runs Phoenix Consulting Group." As I prepared for bed, I couldn't help but smile at the thought of tomorrow's revelation. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold. It's served with a billion-dollar merger agreement and a signature line that reads, "And Phoenix, CO." The Phoenix Consulting Group's headquarters occupied the top 5 floors of downtown's most prestigious office tower. I stood in my private elevator, ascending to the penthouse conference room, watching the city wake up through the glass walls. "Good morning, Miss Phoenix," my assistant Sarah greeted me as I stepped out. After 10 years, she was one of the few who knew both sides of my life. "The Morrison Tech team is waiting in the main conference room. Your cousin Victoria is apparently quite vocal about the delay." I checked my reflection in the brushed steel walls. Gone was the intentionally understated Anna from last night's reunion. Today I was Phoenix, CEO of one of the world's most powerful consulting firms. "How long have they been waiting?" I asked, already knowing the answer. 20 minutes, Sarah's smile held a touch of mischief. "Miss Morrison has mentioned her important position approximately 12 times. Well then," I straightened my jacket, "let's not keep them waiting any longer." The main conference room was a testament to power, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of the city. Victoria stood at one end of the massive table, mid-rant about the disrespect of being kept waiting. James sat nearby, presumably there as Morrison Tech's legal counsel. Several board members, including my uncle Robert, Victoria's father, and Morrison Tech's CEO, occupied the other seats. "Finally," Victoria exclaimed as the door opened. "Do you have any idea who I dash?" Her voice trailed off as I walked in, her expression shifting from outrage to confusion to disbelief. "Anna." James stood up so quickly he knocked over his water glass. "What are you doing here? This is a private meeting." I walked calmly to the head of the table, setting my briefcase down with a quiet click that seemed to echo in the stunned silence. "Good morning, everyone. I apologize for the delay. Shall we begin discussing the Morrison Tech Global Tech merger?" Uncle Robert found his voice first. "Anna, this is highly inappropriate. Where is Phoenix? We're here to meet with the CEO." "You are." I sat down, nodding to Sarah, who began distributing folders. Phoenix. Anna Morrison Phoenix, founder and CEO of Phoenix Consulting Group, and as of this morning, the majority shareholder of Global Tech Industries. The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria had gone pale, her designer dress suddenly seeming like a child's costume. James was frantically flipping through the documents Sarah had distributed, his legal training kicking in as he searched for a loophole. This is impossible," Victoria stammered. "You're just a small-time consultant. You work out of a tiny office downtown." "That office?" I smiled. "It's one of our meeting spaces for local clients. Phoenix Consulting Group operates in 47 countries, Victoria. We own this building, and as of today, we're about to own a controlling interest in Morrison Technologies." Uncle Robert slammed his hand on the table. "This is outrageous. This is some kind of trick. You're just jealous of Victoria's success. I calmly opened my laptop and projected a series of documents onto the wall screen. Let's review, shall we? 5 years ago, Morrison Tech began losing market share. You needed capital, so you started taking loans from Global Tech Financial, one of my subsidiaries. 3 years ago, Victoria's brilliant expansion strategy put you further in debt. And last year, when you were desperate for a merger partner, we found Global Tech, Victoria whispered, realization dawning on her face. No, cousin. Global Tech found you. Or more accurately, I positioned it to save you. I clicked through more slides. Every loan, every contract, every deal you thought you cleverly negotiated, it was all part of my plan. James jumped up, his legal instincts kicking in. This is corporate manipulation. We'll fight this in court. By all means, I smiled, pulling out another folder. But first, you might want to review these. I slid copies across the table. Detailed records of every instance of corporate fraud at Morrison Tech over the past decade. The inflated profits, the hidden losses, the shell companies you created to dodge taxes. Yes, James, including the ones you helped set up. The color drained from both their faces. Uncle Robert sank into his chair, suddenly looking every bit his age. Why? Victoria's voice cracked. Why go to all this trouble? I leaned forward. Remember Dad's company? The one he built from nothing? The one you and Uncle Robert forced him to sell during his illness, claiming you'd protect his legacy? Uncle Robert shifted uncomfortably. We gave him fair market value. Fair. I felt years of controlled anger surface. You manipulated his medication schedule to ensure he wasn't lucid during the negotiations. You convinced Mom that selling was the only way to pay for his treatment. Then you stripped the company for parts and laid off hundreds of loyal employees. I stood up, walking to the window. Dad died believing his life's work had failed. That's when I decided to build something he would have been proud of, something that would eventually bring justice. So this is revenge? James scoffed, though his voice trembled. No, I turned back to face them. This is business. Phoenix Consulting Group legitimately owns controlling interest in Morrison Tech now. Every contract is legal, every transaction documented. The only difference is I'll run it the way Dad would have, with integrity. Victoria, always quick to spot an angle, straightened up. We can work something out, Anna. We're family after all. I could help you manage Dash. Actually, I interrupted, your position has been eliminated in the new organization structure. But don't worry, I'm not heartless. You'll receive a generous severance package, provided you sign these non-disclosure agreements. As Sarah distributed the paperwork, I continued, James, your law firm's services will no longer be required. And Uncle Robert, your retirement package is detailed on page 3. The next hour was a blur of signatures and subdued legal discussions. As the room slowly emptied, Victoria lingered at the door. All these years, she said quietly, while we were mocking you, I was building an empire, I finished. One that honors Dad's memory. After they left, Sarah brought in a familiar wooden box, Dad's old humidor that used to sit on his desk. Your father would be proud, she said softly. I opened the box and pulled out a photo, Dad at his company's opening day, young and full of dreams. Next to it, I placed a new photo. The Phoenix Consulting Group logo now mounted on the Morrison Tech building. The thing about phoenixes, I murmured, is that they rise from the ashes stronger than before. My phone buzzed, the stock market had opened and Morrison Tech's shares were soaring under its new management. Dad's legacy wasn't just restored, it was transformed into something even greater. As I looked out over the city, I thought about tonight's charity gala, another family event where the Morrisons traditionally flaunted their success. This time I wouldn't be the quiet cousin in the corner. This time, I'd be the one making the announcements about Morrison Tech's new direction, its commitment to ethical business practices, and its renewed dedication to its employees. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about building something so magnificent that their petty achievements pale in comparison. And as I prepared for the evening ahead, I couldn't help but smile at the thought of Victoria's face when she realized that her nobody cousin now controlled not just her company, but her entire future. Success, after all, is the sweetest revenge. That evening, the annual Morrison Family Foundation Gala was in full swing at the same Grand Plaza Hotel where we'd had our reunion just yesterday. But tonight was different. Tonight I wasn't hiding anymore. I arrived fashionably late, wearing a custom Alexander McQueen gown that cost more than Victoria's monthly salary. The whispers started immediately as I walked in. News of the morning's events had spread like wildfire through the family. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed, "please welcome Ms. and Phoenix Morrison, CEO of Phoenix Consulting Group and the new chairman of Morrison Technologies." The silence was deafening. Aunt Eleanor nearly dropped her champagne glass. Across the room, Victoria stood frozen, her usual social circle having already deserted her for more promising connections. I took the stage with measured steps, enjoying the weight of every eye in the room. "Good evening, everyone. Today marks a new chapter for Morrison Technologies." I paused, surveying the crowd. "And a new chapter for our family's legacy." The presentation screen behind me lit up with images, Dad's original company logo morphing into the Phoenix Consulting Group emblem, then merging with Morrison Tech's brand. 10 years ago when I left Anderson & Company, many of you thought I was throwing away my future. My eyes found Victoria's in the crowd. What you didn't know was that I was building something bigger than any of us could imagine. I clicked to the next slide, showing Phoenix Consulting Group's global reach. While you were all focused on your corner offices and executive titles, I was creating a network that spans 5 continents. While you mocked my little consulting business, I was orchestrating deals that shaped industries. The screens filled with numbers: our annual revenue, market capitalization, global influence. Several gasps echoed through the ballroom as the true scale of Phoenix Consulting Group became clear.
The expensive wine in Nathan's glass sloshed dangerously as he gestured dramatically, recounting his latest triumph to our captivated family. The investors couldn't write the check fast enough, he boasted, his designer watch catching the light. $50 million, just like that. I took a small sip of my own wine, watching my mother beam at her stepson with undisguised pride. Dad was nodding along, thoroughly impressed by the young tech mogul he'd helped raise. Even my younger sister Emma was hanging on Nathan's every word. "And it all started with Amanda's little idea," Nathan added, throwing me what he probably thought was a generous acknowledgement. "Remember that conversation at Christmas 2 years ago? About personalized AI therapy? Who knew it would turn into something this big?" My name is Amanda Chen, and at 32, I was watching my stepbrother take credit for a company that was secretly mostly mine. Not that Nathan or anyone else at this table knew that particular detail. "It was just a rough concept," I said modestly, playing my part. "You're the one who made it real." Nathan raised his glass in my direction. "Here's to family inspiration. Though maybe next time come up with an idea you can actually execute yourself, sis." The condescension in his voice made my mother wince, but I just smiled. If he only knew about the execution that had already taken place. 2 years ago, that Christmas conversation hadn't been the casual chat Nathan remembered. I'd spent months developing the AI therapy concept, creating detailed business plans, and even building a basic prototype. When I shared it with Nathan, I'd been looking for genuine feedback from someone I thought I could trust. Instead, 3 weeks later, he'd registered the company himself. Therapy was born, with Nathan Stewart as its founder and CEO. He even used the name I'd suggested. "Did you really come up with a basic idea, Amanda?" Emma asked, her eyes wide. "That's so cool." "Oh, it was nothing," I assured her, catching Nathan's sharp look. "Just a vague concept. Nathan did all the real work." What Nathan didn't know was that while he'd been busy playing tech visionary, I'd been methodically acquiring control of his company through a complex network of shell corporations and investment vehicles. My phone buzzed quietly, a message from Marcus, my lawyer. "Final paperwork filed. You now officially own 75.4% of Therapy through the holding companies. Congratulations." I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment to appreciate the irony of the situation. Nathan thought he was celebrating the biggest deal of his life, but he just unknowingly sold the majority of his company to me. The journey to this moment had started the day I discovered Nathan's betrayal. I'd been working late at my consulting job when a colleague sent me a link. "Check out this hot new startup, right up your alley." There it was, my entire concept, down to the specific features I'd outlined, being presented by Nathan at a tech conference. He was using my slides, my research, even some of my code, all repackaged under his name. Most people would have confronted him immediately or sued for theft of intellectual property. But I knew better. Nathan had carefully covered his tracks, and our family dynamics made direct confrontation complicated. Mom had married Nathan's father when we were teenagers, and she'd spent years trying to blend our families seamlessly. So I chose a different path. While Nathan focused on being the charismatic face of therapy, I worked quietly behind the scenes. My consulting job gave me connections to private equity firms and venture capitalists. I created a series of investment companies, each seemingly independent but all leading back to me. Every time therapy needed funding, my shell companies were there, offering attractive terms. Nathan, ever confident in his own brilliance, never questioned why investors were so eager to buy in. He was too busy giving interviews and attending tech conferences to notice that each funding round diluted his ownership while strengthening mine. "Everything okay in there?" Mom called through the bathroom door, snapping me back to the present. "Nathan's about to tell us about the expansion plans." "Coming." I called back, checking my reflection in the mirror. The same soft-spoken, supportive stepsister Nathan had always underestimated looked back at me. I returned to the dining room just as Nathan was explaining his vision for the company's future. "The acquiring company wants to take therapy global," he announced. "They're keeping me on as Chief Innovation Officer with a huge compensation package." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," his father beamed. "Always knew you had it in you." I caught Emma giving me a strange look. My younger sister had always been more perceptive than the rest of the family. "Did you work with AI in your consulting job, Amanda?" she asked innocently. Nathan's smile flickered slightly. "Different kind of AI," he said quickly. Amanda's work was much more basic. If he only knew that my basic work had included developing most of the core technology his company now used. The patents were held by one of my shell companies, which had then licensed them to therapy at suspiciously favorable rates. "Actually," I said, deciding to push just a little, "I'd love to hear more about the technical side of things, Nathan. How did you solve the privacy compliance issues we discussed that Christmas?" I watched him squirm slightly before launching into a vague explanation that basically outlined the exact solution I detailed in my original business plan. The one he'd stolen. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Marcus. "Acquiring company wants to meet with all major shareholders next week. Time to decide how you want to handle this." That was the question, wasn't it? In a few days, Nathan would discover that his great exit wasn't quite what he thought. The company he believed he'd sold wasn't really his to sell. "More wine, Amanda?" Mom offered, noticing my distraction. "No thanks," I smiled. "I need to drive back to the city tonight. Early meeting tomorrow." Nathan couldn't resist another dig. "Must be tough still working those long consulting hours. You should have been more entrepreneurial, like me. Taken some risks." I thought about the millions I'd spent quietly buying control of his company, the careful legal maneuvering, the years of patient planning while he took credit for my work. "We can't all be visionary founders," I said mildly. "Some of us have to do the detail work." Dad raised his glass. "To Nathan, our family's first millionaire." Everyone clinked glasses enthusiastically. I participated in the toast while checking my calendar. The shareholders' meeting was in exactly 6 days. That's when Nathan would learn what detail work really meant. As dinner wrapped up, Nathan pulled me aside. "Listen, sis," he said, his voice softening with what he probably thought was generosity. "I feel bad about how things worked out. How about I throw some consulting work your way once the acquisition is complete? Small token of appreciation for the original idea." I looked at my stepbrother, successful, arrogant, completely unaware of what was coming, and felt an almost overwhelming urge to tell him everything. Instead, I just smiled. "That's very thoughtful, Nathan. But let's see how the acquisition plays out first." He clapped me on the shoulder, already turning away. "Your loss. But the offer stands. Family has to look out for each other, right?" "Right," I agreed softly. "Family first." The conference room at Marcus's law firm felt too small for the tension it contained. I sat quietly at the end of the table, watching Nathan chat confidently with the acquiring company's executives. He hadn't even questioned my presence when I walked in, probably assumed I was there to take notes or provide administrative support. Before we proceed with final signatures, Marcus began, "We need to review the shareholder structure of Therapy." He started distributing folders to everyone present. As you'll see, the ownership breakdown is somewhat different from what was initially presented. Nathan flipped open his folder casually, then froze. I watched the color drain from his face as he processed the information in front of him. "This must be a mistake," he said, his voice tight. "These numbers can't be right." "The numbers are quite accurate," Marcus replied calmly. "Through various investment vehicles, the majority shareholder of Therapy is actually Nova Holdings LC, which owns 75.4% of the company." "I've never heard of Nova Holdings," Nathan snapped, shuffling through the papers. "I own this company. I founded it." "Actually," I said, speaking for the first time, "Nova Holdings is my company." The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan's head snapped up, his eyes meeting mine with a mix of confusion and dawning horror. "What?" he whispered. "Perhaps we should take a brief recess," Marcus suggested smoothly. "Give everyone a chance to review the documentation thoroughly." The acquiring company's executives nodded, looking somewhat bemused. They'd been briefed on the real ownership structure weeks ago. It was only Nathan who was in the dark. As soon as the door closed behind them, Nathan exploded. "What the hell is this, Amanda? Some kind of joke?" "No joke," I said calmly. "Every funding round, every investment, every major stock purchase over the past 2 years, they all trace back to companies I control." "You never bothered to look too closely at your investors, did you?" But that's impossible. You don't have that kind of money." I smiled. "My consulting work paid better than you thought. And it's amazing what you can do with good credit and better lawyers when you have a solid business plan. The original business plan, actually. The one you took from my laptop that Christmas." His face went from pale to red. "You can't prove that." "I don't need to," I replied, opening my own folder. "The ownership structure is legal and documented. You've been running my company all this time, Nathan. You just didn't know it." He slumped in his chair, the reality of the situation finally hitting him. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why not just confront me when I started the company? Would you have listened? Would anyone?" I leaned forward. "You saw an opportunity and took it, never thinking I'd be capable of doing anything about it. That was your mistake." "Does the family know?" "Not yet. Though I imagine dinner conversations will be interesting once they do." Marcus returned then, the other executives filing in behind him. "Shall we continue?" he asked professionally. The next hour was excruciating for Nathan. Every page he had to sign reminded him that he wasn't the brilliant success story he thought he was. His 15% ownership stake was worth a few million, but nothing close to the fortune he'd been bragging about. "One more thing," I said as the meeting wound down. "About your position as Chief Innovation Officer with the acquiring company." Nathan's head snapped up, fear in his eyes. "You can keep it," I said quietly. "You're good at being the face of things, at driving growth. Just remember who you're really working for now." The acquiring company's CEO nodded. "We assumed you'd want him to stay on, given the family connection." Nathan stared at me, trying to process this unexpected mercy. "Why would you let me stay?" "Because unlike you, I understand the value of using people's actual talents," I replied. "You're a good salesman, Nathan, a good frontman. That's worth something, as long as you remember it's not worth everything." The meeting ended with Nathan shell-shocked and silent. As everyone filed out, he caught my arm. "The family," he said quietly. "You'll humiliate me in front of them, in front of my father." I thought about all the dinners I'd sat through, listening to him brag about his stolen success. About Mom's proud smiles, Dad's approving nods, Emma's hero worship. "The truth will come out eventually," I said. "But how and when, that depends on you." Over the next few weeks, the story of Therapy's acquisition made headlines in the tech world. Nathan was quoted in the press releases, still playing his role, but there was a new humility in his statements. Every interview had to be approved by the board, by me. The family found out gradually. Emma figured it out first, reading between the lines of the press coverage and connecting it to things she'd observed over the years. She showed up at my apartment one night, full of questions. "You let him take credit all this time," she said, shaking her head. "Why?" Sometimes winning isn't about getting credit, I told her. It's about having control. Mom and Dad took longer to understand what had happened. The truth came out during another family dinner, this one much quieter than the celebration a few weeks earlier. I don't understand, Mom said, looking between Nathan and me. All this time, I stole her idea, Nathan admitted finally, staring at his plate. I took her work and claimed it as my own. And she outsmarted me completely. The silence that followed was heavy with years of assumptions and misjudgments. Dad looked like he aged a decade in minutes, realizing how wrong he'd been about both his stepchildren. The company is doing well, I said finally, breaking the tension. Nathan's staying on in a leadership role. Nothing has to change. Everything's already changed, Dad said quietly. He was right. The family dynamics shifted subtly but significantly after that. Nathan's boasting stopped. Instead of dismissing my opinions, he began actively seeking them. Mom started asking about my other projects, finally seeing me clearly instead of through the lens of Nathan's success. A year later, Therapy had expanded globally, helping millions of people access mental health support through AI technology. Nathan had grown into his role, actually earning respect instead of just assuming it. We developed a new kind of relationship, not quite friends, but no longer rivals. You could have destroyed me, he said during a rare moment of honesty after a board meeting. Why didn't you? I thought about it carefully before answering. Because this way, you have to live with knowing exactly who you are. And who I am. That's worth more than revenge. The lesson hadn't been cheap. It had cost millions to quietly take control of Therapy. But watching Nathan learn humility, seeing him actually grow into the success he'd once only pretended to be, made it worth every penny. Emma asked me once if I regretted not getting public credit for creating Therapy. I showed her the company's financial reports instead. Credit is for people who need others to believe in them. I told her, power is for people who believe in themselves. The family still has dinner together regularly, though the conversations are different now. Nathan talks less but says more. Mom asks better questions. Dad watches us both with new understanding. And I sit quietly, just as before. But now everyone knows that quiet doesn't mean powerless. Sometimes I catch Nathan looking at me during these dinners, still trying to figure out exactly how I did it. He'll never know all the details, the late nights planning, the careful financial maneuvers, the patience it took to let him think he was winning until the perfect moment. But he knows enough. Enough to understand that success isn't about who talks the loudest or claims credit the fastest. Sometimes it's about the quiet one at the end of the table, the one everyone underestimated, quietly building an empire while they were busy bragging about building a kingdom. The notification lit up my phone screen as I sat in my corner office reviewing quarterly reports. A simple banking alert that would change everything. Withdrawal of $247,856.32 from joint account ending in 4721. I stared at the numbers, my coffee growing cold beside my laptop. James had finally done it. After months of suspicious behavior and thinly veiled lies, my husband of 12 years had made his move. My name is Rebecca Chen, and at 38, I'm a senior financial analyst at one of Boston's top investment firms. I've spent my career helping others protect and grow their assets. Ironic that my own husband thought he could outsmart me when it came to money. The text came moments later, dripping with smug satisfaction. Goodbye, dear. Thanks for funding my fresh start. Enjoy being broke. I took a slow sip of coffee, allowing myself a small smile. James always did underestimate me. He thought I was just the quiet, reliable wife who handled the bills and kept our beautiful colonial home running smoothly while he pursued his entrepreneurial dreams. Dreams that somehow always seemed to require more of our money while producing zero results. What he didn't know was that I'd seen this coming over a year ago. The late nights at networking events that never aligned with any actual business contacts. The mysterious expenses that he couldn't quite explain. The way he'd started asking more questions about our investments and accounts, showing sudden interest in our financial portfolio after years of leaving it all to me. Setting my coffee down, I pulled up my email and clicked on a folder labeled Insurance Documentation. Inside were dozens of screenshots and recordings I'd been gathering. Every suspicious transaction, every questionable receipt, every document where James had practiced forging my signature. I'm thorough by nature. It's what makes me good at my job. But the real insurance policy was something James would never think to look for. He was too arrogant, too convinced of his own cleverness to imagine that his quiet, dutiful wife had outmaneuvered him long before he made his move. "Everything okay?" My assistant Sarah poked her head in, concern etched on her face. "You've been staring at your phone for a while." I nodded, slipping my phone into my desk drawer. "Just fine. Actually, could you clear my afternoon? There are some personal matters I need to handle." The drive home felt surreal. 12 years of marriage ending with a text message and an empty bank account. I should have been devastated, but all I felt was a strange sense of calm. I'd had months to process this, to accept that the man I married wasn't who I thought he was. Our house was exactly as I'd left it that morning, immaculate and ordered, every surface gleaming. James had always complained about my obsession with keeping everything in its place. He never understood that my need for order wasn't about appearances, it was about control. I walked directly to my home office, my heels clicking against the hardwood floors. The leather chair creaked as I sat down and opened my laptop. Time to set things in motion. First, I pulled up the footage from the hidden camera I'd installed in our home office 6 months ago. There he was, James, hunched over my desk at 3 a.m. last night, practicing my signature repeatedly on a stack of papers. The timestamp would be useful later. Next, I logged into my private email account, one James knew nothing about, and sent a pre-written message to my lawyer, Angela. We prepared for this contingency weeks ago, all the paperwork ready to go. The evidence was overwhelming. Forged signatures, unauthorized transfers, documented infidelity with his much younger business partner, Megan. My phone buzzed again. Another text from James. "Don't bother trying to fight this. I covered my tracks. By the time you figure out what happened, Megan and I will be starting our new life together." I actually laughed out loud at that one. James was so focused on covering his tracks that he never stopped to look for mine. What he didn't know was that the joint account he just emptied was exactly what I'd wanted him to find. The real money, nearly $2 million from my yearly bonuses and investments, was safely tucked away in accounts he couldn't touch. I'd been quietly moving it for months, a little at a time, too gradually for him to notice. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. Through the security camera feed, I saw Angela standing on the porch, her briefcase in hand. "Right on time. I came as soon as I got your email," she said as I let her in. "Everything's ready to file. Are you sure you want to do this today?" I led her to the kitchen, putting on a pot of coffee. No time like the present. He's probably on his way to the airport right now, feeling very pleased with himself. Angela pulled out a thick folder of documents. The forensic accountant's report is damning. The forged signatures. The unauthorized transfers. He's not just looking at a divorce, Rebecca. This is fraud. I know. I sat down across from her, smoothing my skirt. But first, let's focus on freezing his accounts. All of them. The ones he thinks I don't know about. I pulled out my own folder, bank statements, account numbers, detailed records of every hidden account James had opened over the past year. My husband wasn't nearly as clever as he thought he was, especially not with a wife who had access to some of the best financial investigators in Boston. "How long have you known?" Angela asked, leafing through the documents with raised eyebrows. "About the affair?" "Almost a year. About his plan to clean out our accounts." I suspected for months. He started asking too many questions about our finances, wanting to know exactly how much we had and where it was all kept. I poured us each a cup of coffee. He thought he was being subtle. Angela shook her head. Men like James never expect their wives to be 2 steps ahead. They're so convinced of their own brilliance that they don't see what's right in front of them. She wasn't wrong. James had spent our entire marriage treating me like I was just the dutiful wife who kept his life running smoothly. He forgot, or never bothered to notice, that I was the one who handled all our finances, who built our investment portfolio, who quietly turned his mediocre salary into a comfortable nest egg through careful planning and smart investments. My phone buzzed again. Another notification, this time from my private investigator. James and Megan had just checked in for a flight to Bermuda. First class, naturally. He was burning through my hard-earned money already. "Should we tell him the accounts are frozen?" Angela asked, a slight smile playing at her lips. I stirred my coffee thoughtfully. "Not yet. Let him get to Bermuda first. Let him try to check into that luxury resort he booked. That's when we'll spring the trap. As Angela and I spent the next few hours going through paperwork, I couldn't help but think about how different reality was from what James imagined. He thought he was leaving me destitute, running off into the sunset with his young girlfriend and my life savings. Instead, he was walking into a carefully laid trap, one that would snap shut the moment he tried to access any of that money. The joint account he drained, that was barely a fraction of our true worth. The real assets were safe, protected, and completely out of his reach. "One more thing," Angela said as she packed up her briefcase. "Are you sure you want to stay in the house? You could move, start fresh somewhere else." I looked around at the home I'd spent 12 years building. Every piece of furniture, every artwork on the walls, every carefully chosen detail had been my choice, my vision. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere. This is my home." James is the one who's going to learn what it means to start over from nothing. As Angela left, I poured myself a glass of wine and settled onto the patio, watching the sun set over our perfectly manicured backyard. In a few hours, James would land in Bermuda, ready to start his new life. Instead, he'd find himself stranded in a foreign country with frozen accounts and mounting legal troubles. I picked up my phone and typed out a single message. "Thanks for making this so easy. Enjoy Bermuda." Then I blocked his number and turned back to watch the sunset. The real fireworks would start tomorrow, but for now, I had a quiet evening ahead of me. For the first time in months, I felt truly at peace. This was just the beginning of James's rude awakening, and I was finally ready to show him exactly who he'd underestimated. The first panicked call came at exactly 6:42 a.m. the next morning, not from James, but from his sister Karen. I watched my phone vibrate across the kitchen counter as I sipped my morning coffee, her name flashing urgently on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "Hello? Rebecca, what did you do?" Karen's voice was shrill, accusatory. "James is stranded in Bermuda. The hotel won't let them check in. None of his cards are working, and..." "Them?" I interrupted softly. "Oh, you mean James and Megan, his 26-year-old mistress. I wasn't aware you knew about her, Karen." The line went quiet for a moment. Then, more subdued. He said you were being unreasonable about the money, that you were controlling and he needed to get away." I couldn't help but laugh. "Is that what he told you? Did he mention forging my signature, draining our joint account? The months he spent planning to leave me with nothing. He wouldn't..." Karen's voice trailed off, uncertainty creeping in. "Check your email," I said calmly. "I sent you something 10 minutes ago. Take a look, and then we can continue this conversation." I heard the faint sound of typing, then a sharp intake of breath. I'd sent her the video footage of James practicing my signature, along with bank statements showing his systematic theft over the past months. "Oh my God," Karen whispered. "Rebecca, I had no idea." No one did. That's exactly what James counted on. He thought he was so clever, Karen. He never imagined I was 10 steps ahead of him. After hanging up with Karen, I opened my laptop to check my emails. My lawyer had been busy. Notifications from various banks confirming frozen accounts, pending fraud investigations, and holds on any further transactions. James wouldn't be able to access a penny without setting off more red flags than a military parade. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when my phone lit up again, this time with a call from an unknown Bermuda number. "James, where is it?" he snarled, not bothering with a greeting. "What did you do with the money?" "Good morning to you too," I replied, keeping my voice light. "How's Bermuda? I hear the weather's lovely this time of year." "This isn't funny, Rebecca. We're stuck here with no access to anything. The hotel won't let us check in without a valid card, and every single account is frozen." I could hear Megan in the background, her voice high and panicked. The reality of their situation was finally sinking in. "That's unfortunate," I said, examining my nails. "Almost as unfortunate as discovering your husband has been forging your signature and planning to steal your life savings." "You can't prove anything," he snapped, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Actually, I can prove everything, James. The video footage of you practicing my signature, the documented transfers, the hidden accounts you opened. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? I'm a financial analyst. It's literally my job to spot things like this." There was a long pause. When he spoke again, His voice had changed, taking on that cajoling tone he'd always used when he wanted something. "Becca, honey, let's talk about this. We can work something out. Like you worked things out with Megan, planning to leave me penniless while you ran off together." I took a sip of coffee. "No, I don't think we'll be working anything out. But my lawyer would love to talk to you. She's very interested in discussing the criminal implications of forgery and fraud." "You're bluffing," he said, but I could hear the fear creeping into his voice. "Check your email, James. I sent everything to your sister Karen this morning. The video footage, the bank records, all of it. How long do you think it will take for everyone to know exactly what you tried to do?" The line went quiet except for Megan's increasingly panicked questions in the background. "James? James, what's going on? What are we going to do?" "One more thing," I added, enjoying the silence on his end. "That joint account you emptied, the one you thought contained all our money, that was just what I wanted you to find. The real assets, my bonuses, our investments, everything we built over the years, they're all safe in accounts you can't touch. I've been moving them for months." You can't," he sputtered. "I can, and I did. You spent so much time planning your great escape that you never stopped to think that I might be planning too. The difference is my plan worked." I could hear Megan getting more hysterical in the background. "What do you mean we can't access the money?" "James, you said this was handled." "Oh, and James," I added, unable to resist twisting the knife a little, "you might want to start looking for a way home. Those first-class return tickets you booked, they've been canceled. Coach might be a bit cramped, but I'm sure you and Megan will manage. That is, if you can scrape together enough for the fare." Before he could respond, I hung up. My hands were shaking slightly, but not from fear or anger. It was exhilarating, finally letting James see exactly who he'd underestimated all these years. My phone immediately started buzzing with texts. "You can't do this to me. We need to talk. Please, Becca, just hear me out." I blocked his number without reading anymore. There was nothing left to say. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and paperwork. James and Megan had managed to scrape together enough money from her savings to get back from Bermuda in economy class, much to their dismay. They were staying at her studio apartment, a far cry from the luxury resort they planned on. Word got out quickly about what had happened. James's carefully crafted image as a successful entrepreneur crumbled as people learned the truth. His business contacts disappeared, his friends stopped returning his calls, and even his family kept their distance. Karen had been particularly vocal about her disgust with his actions. The divorce proceedings moved swiftly, backed by overwhelming evidence of James's fraud. He didn't even try to contest it. He couldn't. Not with the mountain of proof I had gathered. His only attempt at negotiation came through his lawyer, asking if I would consider dropping the fraud charges in exchange for a quick settlement. I declined. 1 month after James's failed escape attempt, I sat in my lawyer's office, reviewing the final divorce agreement. The terms were exactly what we pushed for. I kept the house, my retirement accounts, and all our joint assets. James would be paying restitution for the money he'd stolen, along with my legal fees. "He's lucky we didn't pursue criminal charges," Angela said, watching me sign the papers. "The evidence we had could have put him behind bars." I set down the pen and sat back, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. The loss of his reputation, his comfortable lifestyle, and every penny he tried to steal is punishment enough. Besides, I hear Megan left him last week. Apparently, living in a tiny apartment with no access to the luxury lifestyle he promised wasn't what she signed up for. Angela laughed, shaking her head. "Men like James never learn. They think they're so clever, but they can't see past their own egos. You, on the other hand," she gestured at the paperwork spread across her desk, "you play this perfectly." That evening, I walked through my house, legally and officially now, and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Every room held memories, but they no longer hurt. I'd taken back control of my life in a way James never saw coming. My phone buzzed with a text from Karen. "Had dinner with James today. He's miserable. Serves him right. Hope you're doing well." I smiled, typing back a quick reply. Karen had become an unexpected ally through all of this, choosing to stand by me rather than support her brother's deception. It was nice to know that some family ties were stronger than blood. 6 months later, I was sitting in my office reviewing quarterly reports. Much like I had been on the day James tried to steal our savings, But everything was different now. I was different. A notification popped up on my phone. A news alert about James. He'd been hired as a junior sales associate at a local car dealership. Quite a step down from his dreams of being a successful entrepreneur living the high life in Bermuda. I closed the alert without reading further. James's life wasn't my concern anymore. I had my own future to focus on, one that I had protected through careful planning and quiet strength. My assistant Sarah knocked on my door. "Your 3 o'clock is here. The new client looking for investment advice?" I nodded, gathering my papers. "Send them in." As I prepared to meet with my client, I couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Here I was still doing what I'd always done, helping people protect and grow their assets. The only difference was that now everyone knew I practiced what I preached. The story of how I'd outmaneuvered my husband's attempt to steal my life savings had spread through professional circles, earning me a reputation as someone who didn't just understand money. I understood how to protect it. My client list had grown significantly, particularly among women looking to secure their financial futures. That evening, as I drove home to my peaceful house, I thought about how differently things could have turned out if I hadn't trusted my instincts, if I hadn't started planning the moment I first suspected James's betrayal. I pulled into my driveway, the security lights welcoming me home. My phone buzzed one last time, another blocked call from James. I declined it without a second thought. He'd lost the right to my attention the moment he decided to betray me. Inside, I poured myself a glass of wine and settled onto my patio, watching the sunset just like I had the night James left. But this time, there was no uncertainty, no waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was exactly where I wanted to be, in control of my life and my future. James had thought he was writing the end of our story when he drained that joint account. Instead, he'd only succeeded in showing me exactly how strong I could be. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about moving forward and thriving on your own terms. And that's exactly what I had done.